Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the TouchDownUnder podcast. I'm Jack, your host, and as always, I'm joined by Emilien.
Hey, how's it going?
Anthony.
Good to be here.
And Arif by Zoom.
Great to be here.
Today is episode 25 of the TDU podcast, a mini milestone. We have just wrapped up week 9 of the NFL season, and it was another big week in the league as usual. And one of the big talking points was the Buccaneers' shock defeat at the hands of New Orleans at home, and it's kind of rocked the NFC South title race, boys.
Yeah, I think most people going into this game obviously predicted the Bucs to win. But even those who would have predicted the Saints to win, I don't think anyone would have predicted how dominant they looked. They looked absolutely incredible. The Bucs looked terrible. I believe that's Brady's biggest defeat ever, or one of them at least, has to be. Yeah, and it's really interesting to know going forward now that the Saints have a 2-0 head-to-head advantage over the Bucs, so they're well within their own right to win the NFC South now.
Yeah, it's important to note that this is the first time in Tom Brady's career that he has been shut out by a team in the same division in a NFL season.
When by shutout, do you mean that he hasn't scored a touchdown? Because they did score 3.
No, I meant like they lost both legs of the playing against a team in the division. So
okay.
Yeah. He had done before in the AFC against the Dolphins, Jets, or the Bills. It's happened finally his first career with the Buccaneers. So it's a milestone that a lot of people are waiting for, I reckon.
The Saints really forced the Bucs, and especially Brady, into some uncharacteristically bad decision making. We saw on some of his picks. I mean, they were on fourth down, but they were still quite appalling. And yeah, Emilien, the Saints really do have a good chance. I mean, we thought maybe they'd have to go through the wild card round to get in, but it's looking possible that they might actually get a division title.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, it was a big win for the Saints because if the Bucs won, they would have gone to 7-2, and the Saints would have been at 5-3. And it would have been tough for the Saints to come back and win the title, that division title from that deficit. So it was a massive win, and now, just like that, they're up 2-0 on the head-to-head, and it is certainly going to be a long road back for the Bucs if they are to win the NFC South. Now, another major talking point this week in the league was the Miami Dolphins, who are just continuing to impress after they beat the Cardinals in Arizona in a really tight, entertaining game. It's 2-0 as the Dolphins starter, and they just look really composed on both offense and defense.
Yeah, definitely. I think that game obviously it started with that defensive touchdown by the Dolphins, and the same way as they started last week, the Dolphins, they've got that defensive touchdown against the Rams, so they're in good form as well. So, whenever you got a defense that's really stepping up the way the Dolphins are, it makes the job of the quarterback. It's where in this situation, the rookie Tua, makes the job easy. So he's been able to really showcase his talent behind that offense. That's also, they're doing really well as well. They're well balanced, and that game against the Cardinals was really close. And the Cardinals arguably should have taken that overtime, that missed field goal late in the game. So they'll go down one of the top 5 games of the season, I think. It's early on. It's halfway through the season now. There's plenty of better games to come, but that was really good showcase of the talent of the Dolphins defense and their offense.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I did mention last week, since the Dolphins were my team to watch, I did say that the defense really needs to take some pressure off of Tua because he is a rookie. He's only played this was his second game starting, right? So you can't expect him to win games for the team, and the defense is very well helps him in that regard. That being said, I do think while the Dolphins are making a very strong case for the playoffs, I can't see them doing well in the playoffs. I think there's just too much experience up now, but very promising for the future of the franchise over the next, I don't know how many years, if Tua continues to grow and develop and get more comfortable in that offense.
Onto the first segment for today's episode, and that is the power rankings. And kicking it off at number 32 is the New York Jets. At 31 is the Jaguars. The Washington football team are at 30. The Cowboys remain at 29, and the Giants move up to 28 after their resounding win over Washington. Now, I'll agree with the point with you guys. Obviously, the NFC East is still, anyone's game at this point. It's too early to tell. A lot of teams, all four teams look, like each team has holes on both sides of the ball, so it's really hard to say who is really the front runner. Obviously, the Eagles look like the front runner, but it's still quite early in the season. And I think if New York beat Philadelphia this week, do they have any hope of winning the NFC East?
I still think they can. I mean, they've shown the last couple of weeks that they have the potential, and it also really helps that the NFC East in general is performing quite poorly at the moment. So yeah, they're every chance.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note the Giants have done well in their division games. They're 2-0 against the Washington football team now, and they beat the Cowboys earlier on. So now if they beat the Eagles as well, they can't lose any of their head-to-head matchups for the rest of the season, right? And that, I think, is what's going to really be the difference in who wins the division and who doesn't. So Giants beating the Eagles here, I could comfortably say they're the front runner if they do beat the Eagles this week.
At 27 of the Lions, the Bengals are at 26, and the Atlanta Falcons are at 25. Now, the Falcons have won 3 out of their last 4 games, and a couple of those wins have come after the Falcons fired their head coach, former head coach Dan Quinn. Do we think their season is still alive?
Have you looked at their schedule? It's a monster schedule. They play the Saints, then the Raiders, then the Saints again, then the Chargers, then the Bucks, then the Chiefs, then the Bucks. For me, there's no way in hell they win most of their games. They really had to. If I'm a Falcons fan going into the season, I look at the schedule. I see the first 8 weeks. I'm saying we have to win the majority of these games in order to make the playoffs this year. They didn't, and now they're in. If they can somehow make the playoffs after this run, that has to be one of the most impressive things I'll ever see, because that is a monster run, and it's going to be insanely difficult for them to win even half of those games.
Yeah. So after the week 5, the Dolphins were 0-5, and they came in 1-5 after that first win against Minnesota in week 6. You have to make the playoffs in the NFL. You have to have a complete season. You can't just go. It's very rare to see Atlanta in a situation like this that they're in go and make the playoffs, even a wild card or anything. It'd be really unrealistic from here to expect the Falcons to make the playoffs. If they did, it'd be something miraculous.
Yeah.
And it'd be against the numbers. So I think, unfortunately, Falcons fans, I don't think it's going to happen, but I'd like to see people prove me wrong, though.
I'm sure they'd really be kicking themselves in those first few weeks of the season. All those losses they had, especially that one against the Cowboys. I mean, one of those Falcons guys could have easily just picked up that ball and the game would have been over on that onside kick. So they'll be really upset with that. But you really hit the nail on the head there. Their schedule is way too difficult. And not to mention the potential teams that could be coming from the NFC West who will also be wanting one of those wild card spots. So it's going to be way too tough, I reckon.
Yeah, that's right, Arif. That loss against the Cowboys, you kind of set their tone for the season. A win on that day would have been really important and crucial for the season. I feel like if they won that game, then maybe for these outcomes where they lose, at the death, go the other way. Because if they learn how to win later on early in the season, then it doesn't, it's not like it's continuing trend as it has been this season so far. You talk about the wild card spots this season. It is worth mentioning that NFL owners did agree to add 2 more playoff teams this season in the playoffs if regular season games are to be cancelled due to the coronavirus. So, theoretically, if the state of affairs in America right now with the coronavirus does get worse and we do see games getting cancelled, then we're likely to see 2 more teams, one in the AFC and one in the NFC, which would then make 4 wildcard teams in each conference. So, I guess their season is technically still alive, but they're going to have to beat these really good teams with any sort of chance.
Possibly on that. So I assume the format that's set for that, if it was to happen, would be the first seed will play the 8th seed. So you have the top team in the AFC playing.
Unless they give a bye to the first 2 seeds, and then you have the 3rd seed.
Yeah, that makes sense. But either way, it'd be a long road to the Super Bowl for that to make it.
I'm not sure what they're seeing, but that is a concept that has been agreed to by all NFL owners. So The Panthers coming at 24. The Broncos are at 23. The LA Chargers are at 22. The 49ers coming at 21. The Texans are at 20, and the Vikings are up to 19. They're 3-5 on the season right now. They have had some really good recent form. However, they've been against lesser opponents generally. But what do we make of this recent good form by the Vikings? Because at 3-5, the season isn't over yet, and they've been playing like one of the better 3-5 teams in recent memory.
Well, 2 words: Dalvin Cook.
Yep.
He has been absolutely tearing teams apart, and it's interesting though. It was against the Packers and Lions the last 2 weeks, 2 big division rivals. They've got the Bears coming up this week. If they manage to beat the Bears this week, that means they'll have good records against their division opponents. So, I don't think playoffs are really there for them this year. I think there's just too much competition in the NFC North and the rest of the NFC. But it's very promising to know how good Dalvin Cook is and how much they really need to focus on him being the core of that offense. They've got to make changes at quarterback in the future, but they've got a solid foundation on offense, and it's also the defense that really needs a lot of work. But they've been impressive the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and the team is it's coming. Their performance a lot better now. They've got the run game sorted out. It's definitely the centerpiece of their offense. There's no question about it. And so they just built off that. So yeah, playoffs like the Falcons. I don't think it's realistic for them, but they should finish the season off well, better than they started it. So that's a good sign at least.
Yeah, I agree with your point, Emilien. Obviously, Dalvin Cook is the centerpiece of that offense. He is number 1 rushing leader right now, and I believe he's the best running back in the game. He is also second in the league in scrimmage yards behind Alvin Kamara. So it's a good company there. And yeah, I mean, you've got guys like Derrick Henry and Ezekiel Elliott, but I think right now, do we agree that he's the best running back in the league?
Yeah, I'd say it's either him or Alvin Kamara, but I do agree right now. Dalvin Cook is doing a lot more, a lot less.
He's number 1 rushing rushing yards in the league. So that's also would agree with you on that.
At 18 of the Patriots, the Eagles are at 17, the Bears at 16, Rams are at 15, the Colts drop down to 14, the Cleveland Browns come in at 13, the Dolphins are up to 12, and at 11 we have the Las Vegas Raiders, who have really defied expectations so far this season. They keep winning those tough games. They won a tough one in Cleveland, and now they staved off the LA Chargers in Los Angeles. Boys, how far can they go in 2020?
Well, I definitely think they'll make the wildcard round. I do truly think they are a wildcard team right now. And depending on who they play, it's going to be tough because I see them getting that seventh spot. So that means they have to play the Chiefs or the Steelers or potentially the Ravens. You don't know. That's going to be a tough game. But I do believe that we've seen a lot bigger upsets in the playoffs before. So I think their ceiling is the divisional round. That's how far they can go. I don't think it's necessarily they will, but that's how far they can go.
Well, Raiders at the moment, they're one of 4 teams that currently 5-3 in the NFC. They got Baltimore at 6-2. So the wildcard seeding is pretty wide open at the moment. It's the middle of the season. There's a long way to go. The Raiders have showed that they can kind of clutch in big games, which part of being a good team is winning the games you should, but also winning those games that are tight. So the finishing games, well, that's really good for them. So I should expect them to, see them in the playoffs. I don't know if they're going to win, but they should make.
I think the Raiders are a potential wildcard team at this point in time. However, I don't really see them going too far in the playoffs. I mean, yeah, they have been able to grind out those tight wins, but it really came down to that last play, obviously, against the Chargers. And if that didn't go their way, then that division, I mean, the Chargers would have had that game on the Raiders and it would have been a bit different, but we'll see how they go for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's a good point. Emilien, you brought up earlier about the Dolphins in the playoffs and their inexperience as a team. I feel like experience could be the difference between which teams in the AFC do make these wildcard spots. Obviously, Derek Carr is an older quarterback than both Tua Tagovailoa and Baker Mayfield. So you think about like poise from experienced quarterbacks late in the season. I feel like it bodes well for the Raiders, compared to the Browns, who have been out of playoffs for years, and the Dolphins, who've been down the bottom of the AFC East as well. So I think they are definitely front runners along with the Colts for a couple of those playoff spots in the AFC. We have the Titans at 10, the Cardinals at 9, and the Seahawks, who are dropped down to number 8 in our rankings. they were, I guess, relatively held instead by the Buffalo Bills on the weekend. I think the question for them is how much will their defense hold them back this season when their offense is, held by good defenses. Obviously, we know the Buffalo Bills isn't a great they're not a great defense, but they did play reasonably well against the Seahawks on the weekend. And towards the end of the season and during the playoffs, they're only going to be coming up against good defenses. And so when the defenses do stop their offense sometimes, can the Seahawks defense step up and stop the other team?
In previous games, that the Seahawks defense is very bend but don't break mentality. Like when the game is on the line, they're able to make a stop when it's needed. But the problem is that the Bills were always leading ahead, and the Seahawks were never really put in a position where the defense had to step up, really to seal the game or something like that. And it's interesting to note because the defensive players on the Seahawks, like the defense got 7 sacks on Josh Allen. That's a pretty good feat. It's just the defensive coordinator, Ken Norton, has to go. He's not using the players to their full potential. And we've seen what these players can do individually. I mean, Jamal Adams, he brings so much to the team, but the scheme itself is just not really letting the Seahawks defense thrive. And it is going to cost the Seahawks some games in the future, as it just has with the Bills. And it did with the Cardinals a few weeks ago.
So 7 sacks on the game for the Seahawks.
Yeah.
And the Bills still put up 44 points.
Yeah.
That says something. If you're a player and you see like your performance and you your numbers like that, that's not too far away from being a franchise record of sacks in a game. Like, won't be that far off. So that's
it's just the defensive backs were playing they were playing in soft coverage.
Yeah.
It just allowed Josh Allen to get the ball out way too quickly, and it's just not good. Arif?
Exactly. They do have the players, Emilien. You're exactly right. They have the players. It's more about the play calling. They're playing really soft zone defense at the moment, especially in the secondary. In fact, it was really embarrassing to see how far away their defenders were from some of those receivers. That being said, I think they really have found themselves pass rushing wise. I think this was a great game, especially they found a really handy veteran in Carlos Dunlap, sending him over from Cincinnati. So that part of the game they've sorted out. It's now about their coverage, I reckon.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see as the season goes on. Obviously, since guys like Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and Regis Simmons departed, and Legion of Boom kind of came to a close, it's been more of an offense first in Seattle. So, I think for them to go potentially to the Super Bowl, we're going to have to see a better performance from the guys in their secondary more than anything, I think. On to number 7, we have the Bills. The Packers are at 6 after their big win. The Buccaneers obviously dropped down to number 5, and the Saints up to number 4. And as we talked about earlier, it's a massive win in the context of that division race. Do we think the Saints are going to be able to keep this lead on the Buccaneers in this NFC South race?
I think this is very unpopular opinion, because whenever you go go up 2 wins against head-to-head in the division, you're more likely to win it. But I still think the Buccaneers have the ability to definitely make a late charge. Well, not late charge. They can come in clutch moments. I think I will go as far to say that was. I think the game against the Saints on Monday, that was something that won't happen very often from the Buccaneers. I think what we saw against the Packers is, I think, what we're more used to seeing from the Buccaneers. So to go up, to be down 33-0 late in the 4th, I don't think we'll see it many times again by the Buccaneers. So I think they'll finish the season strongly. They got AB, their offense is clicking apart from their last game. So I think they'll pick up the momentum again. They'll pick up the form, and I reckon they'll win this division.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Antonio Brown. I think a big reason of the loss this week, like this past week, was definitely just the chemistry between Brady and Brown just wasn't there. Brady's second pick, I believe, maybe first or second. It wasn't really just a miscommunication for Brown, and it cost them big time. But I think the Saints are definitely the front runners. Both teams have a relatively easy schedule going ahead in the final stretch of the season. They both play the Chiefs, so if one of them is able to beat that team, they really can establish themselves as a powerhouse team. But I don't see the Saints really blowing this lead in the division when they have one less loss and the head-to-head record right now.
Yeah, it's fair. I will say, time will tell.
That's a really good point you brought up with the schedule, Emilien. I feel like the only It's really on the Saints really now, because the only really tough team they play are the Chiefs. I mean, they get to play the injured Niners next week, the Falcons twice. Teams like the Broncos and Eagles who haven't been doing so well. So it's really on them if they can keep this lead. They can't be relying on the Bucks to lose or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I don't think the Saints will lose this division. I think they'll win it. But it's interesting because I think that the Buccaneers are built for the postseason with this roster. So I can definitely see them not winning this division, but them going and progressing further than the Saints in the playoffs. As we talked about before the season started, the Saints have kind of let themselves and their fans down in recent years in the playoffs in key stages. So I think that is a factor. Obviously, you've got a guy in Tom Brady who he wins all the time. So in the playoffs, when the games matter most, I think he's a guy that you want leading a team. Obviously, Antonio Brown just coming over, he is going to need some time to adjust. He's got miscommunication throws with Tom Brady. Give him a few weeks and he'll be fine. Same with that offense. The defense is fine as well. I honestly feel like they will go further than the Saints in the playoffs. Maybe not in regular season, but that's not what matters as long as they get in. So I can see them going further than the Saints for sure.
Just a quick point about before wrapping up on the Buccaneers. Look at their roster, especially on offense. They have no holes. They're solid at tight end. They're very solid at wide receiver. They're solid at running back and at quarterback. The defense is arguably better than their offense. So that's why I think that they will eventually take over in this division. Even with their head-to-head record, I think they'll win it. So I think the Buccaneers still, like you said, Jack, completely agree. They're definitely pumped to be a postseason dominant team.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick one hole in their offense, just one, because obviously there aren't many, but I think one hole for them would be when pass protection breaks down, there is a complete lack of mobility at quarterback, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a lot of onus on the offensive line to keep Brady protected, because once that pocket breaks down, he's gone.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a really good point, Jack. And it's 100% like a win now team. Like, not only is it their players, it's just really their financial capabilities as well. Their cap space. They've used up all that cap space on bringing in these established veterans. And after this season, they're probably going to struggle in that department a bit money-wise. And you're completely right. This is a playoff-built team, and they're going to really want to push for a Super Bowl berth this season.
That's right. At 3 are the Ravens, and the Steelers are still at 2, and the Chiefs are still at 1. That wraps up our power rankings going into Week 10 of the NFL season. We're going to move on to our next segment on today's episode, and that is Anthony's Q&A. Anthony, the first question are the
We have this week, but there's some what this seemed, not just this season, in the postseason, but like the last couple of years, whether it's been against the Chargers at home, against the Titans, they haven't stepped up against good teams. And that's been a theme that has carried on into the season in 2020. And we saw it firsthand against the Chiefs earlier on, and against the Steelers 2 weeks ago. They got dominated by defense, and the Steelers defense just completely took out the game on offense for the Ravens. And they're going to need to win those games if they want to get deep into the playoffs. Every single Baltimore fan out there would have the same concerns. And whilst they are 6-2, they got the Steelers are 7-0 above them at the moment. Sorry, 8-0, I believe. That's a big concern for them. They're more than capable. So I think at the moment I would consider them overrated just by looking at the schedule they've got and the teams that they've lost to.
All right, Anthony, who will win the NFC South?
Yeah, so we kind of alluded to this before. I still think the Buccaneers will win it, even though they've got that, they're kind of falling behind a bit on the Saints at the moment. The Bucs are 6-3, whereas the Saints are 6-2. And I think, as mentioned before, I reckon there aren't too many holes on that offense, and that defense is arguably better than their offense. So they're a team that's really, they're primed for the playoffs. They've got all players have got their, their sights on the playoffs, and I think more importantly, got their sights in the Super Bowl. And I think with the big games coming up like the Chiefs later on the season, I think the Buccaneers are better positioned to beat the Chiefs and the Saints are. I think both teams are good. Like you give them that, they've got their strengths. For Alvin Kamara, that's a big strength. But Michael Thomas is back. I think just the players the Buccaneers have on offense, I think they'll just prove to be the better team. In the
So,
season.
Anthony, we just talked about the Saints' schedule and how many, well, I guess an easier run home for the season. Obviously, the Bucks are really good, but that doesn't really matter anything if the Saints keep winning. Do you think the Saints are going to drop some of these games against easy teams?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Who you see them losing to?
I think the Chiefs. I think before, I think when the Saints play in their Week 14 matchup, Week 15 matchup, I just will drop, and I think is even if it's away, wherever that game's being held against the Chiefs, even if it is at Arrowhead, I think they can still come away with a win. I just really like what they're doing on offense, even though they did get smashed this week. I just think they will be the better team overall this season.
Yeah, so I have to disagree with you. Even if the Saints lose to the Chiefs and the Bucks win, it's an interconference game. It doesn't matter in the grand scope of things. The Saints have the 2-0 advantage over the Bucks, and I can't see the Saints really losing any of these easy games. I feel like the Bucks are more likely to lose easy games than the Saints, and I feel like if you bring up the Chiefs, I do believe that the Bucks have a better chance of beating the Chiefs than the Saints, but it doesn't matter because the Saints can win those other games.
Yeah, I understand. I completely understand the things you point out about how it's kind of they're kind of on the back foot to win this division. I understand that's completely reasonable. I just feel like you mentioned as well before, Jack, that this team is positioned to go deep into the playoffs, and even if they don't get that division title, they'll still potentially go further into the playoffs than the Saints. So I just think that come late in the season, even though that you've got all these issues with having to beat, get to the Saints can record. I just think the Buccaneers will find a way to do it. That's just what I think.
I agree. I think that they will have a better chance of beating the Chiefs just because they are playing in Tampa Bay rather than at Arrowhead. But I agree with Emilien that I think even if they do win that, the Saints aren't going to lose too many games going forward because their offense is just so well schemed. And it's got their offensive scheme run by Sean Payton has very few faults. Obviously, Drew Brees, he doesn't have to throw the ball too far or too much. They've got so many weapons, and this is all without Michael Thomas. Once he comes back, it's going to be really tough to contain such an organized offense.
Yeah. All right. Next question for you, Anthony. Even if Russell Wilson is throwing most of the time, is Chris Carson crucial to the team's success?
I think it is. I think it is crucial. I think we've seen the Seahawks in the last couple of weeks. Should get that Arizona game where Wilson was put in that position where he was making awkward throws. I think any situation where that's happening, you have a running back, like a solid running back like Chris Carson, to even it up and to take that edge off on those really crucial games. Those crucial times, it makes all the difference. And the Seahawks, they're a team that can definitely obviously primed to make the playoffs and go, get close to the Super Bowl. So I think Chris Carson, him being healthy, him being able to give Wilson a break, it's crucial. And Wilson's a quarterback that definitely has the ability to, if there was any team, any offense that had Wilson as the quarterback that didn't really have to rely on a running back, I think his throwing game with the receivers he's got, he's able to work his magic. He's a good receiver, good quarterback. So I think Chris Carson is still essential.
Yeah.
It's still essential.
Anthony, can I ask, do you think, because obviously Wilson is, the be-all end-all of that offense. If he's not there, nothing's there, right? So,
Exactly.
But the thing is, I think Chris Carson is replaceable with an offense personally because you've got guys who can step in Carlos Hyde and Travis Hunter if need be. And I feel like, personally, they can do a similar job with Wilson still performing at a very high level. I don't think that Chris Carson is crucial to the offense, considering that Russell Wilson is, the guy there. So I'll ask you, much better do you think Chris Carson really is than a guy like Carlos Hyde?
I mean,
when you got Wilson there,
it's also shown us in the past that they have the diversity in their run game. It has worked. Carlos Hyde has come in and has stepped up when they need to. And so has players like Homer and in Dallas in recent weeks. But I think Chris Carson has been there the longest, and he's been the most consistent when he's been there. So I think, just given that, if you're looking at all the running backs in there, so just look at Chris Carson, and he's just obviously that's done.
So that making crucial.
I think it does make it crucial, yeah. Just consistency.
I also like to bring up that, like, I also believe he's essential, but not just because of that kind of consistency. Carson brings something that, like, not many running backs in the league right now have, and that's like the kind of low center of gravity that he has. Like, it reminds me a lot of Marshawn Lynch. It's obviously we got Alvin Kamara who's good at it. Players like Hyde and especially like the rookie DJ Dallas and Travis Homer, like, they don't really have that kind of low center of gravity where you can always kind of count on them to break that first tackle. I feel like Carson has that ability, and in a game such as the one against Arizona when he got injured early, you could really see that he would have put that game to bed on that final drive. Carlos Hyde wasn't able to break some of those tackles that we are used to Carson seeing. So in that respect, I do think he's a crucial part of that offense.
Ruth, do you think having a low center of gravity for a running back is rare? Because you said you don't think many running backs have a low center of gravity. It's
just like it's hard to say. I personally think it's fairly rare to have his kind of tackle breaking ability. The only running backs I can think of on the top of my head that can break tackles like Carson can are Derrick Henry.
I'm talking about breaking tackles.
No, it's kind of related though when you think about it. Like, I know obviously they're all built to have kind of a low center of gravity, but like also in terms of breaking tackles, I think that Carson is up there as one of maybe like 5 running backs in the league who have that kind of ability, consistently able to do that kind of stuff.
Look, when it comes to breaking tackles, people may or may not agree with, but what Carson brings is that he always fights for those extra yards, and that's what's important in these crucial situations. You brought up the Cardinals game on that final drive where they ran it 3 times straight with Carlos Hyde. If Carson was out, I agree, that would have been gone straight to bed because the Seahawks are definitely missing a lot of power running. They haven't had Carson the past few weeks, and it really shows, and it hurt their run game. And the Bills basically shut down Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
Okay. And there was no run game to help him. DJ Dallas did not get it done. If Carson was in that game, we could have definitely seen a completely different offensive output. And I do think Carson just brings so much more to that offense. I do believe he's the second most valuable player to that offense right now.
It's just about my question. I think the point you just brought up is very relevant. I think the definition of has low center. I think having a player like that is crucial because when you're in the playoffs and you have a high intensity team, high attacking is crucial. Someone has a low center of gravity can break tackles, and there's been that system for a long time, and it's consistent. That's crucial. So your point makes it even more, proves that he's even more crucial than I first initially said. So yeah.
Yeah, obviously some backs are better at breaking tackles than others, but I feel like having a low center of gravity is something that pretty much all running backs have. I don't think you're running back in this league if you don't have a low center of gravity. Obviously, the two things go hand in hand, but I think all running backs have low center of gravity, but not all running backs have, a really good tackle breaking ability. So I agree. I think Carson is a guy who is an above average tackle breaker, but I think you find that most running backs have low center of gravity. That is Anthony's Q&A for this week, and we're going to move on to multi-madness. And we've been unsuccessful in the last few weeks. We're on a bit of a skid right now, but kicking off our 5 legs for this right now is Las Vegas to beat Denver at Allegiant Stadium. Obviously, we talked about the Raiders winning tough games, their experience at quarterback, and just their overall good play of the team this season. Personally, I think they've overachieved in my eyes. So I think to beat Denver at home, I think it's a pretty easy ask, personally.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Denver's a team that's not in the best form. So, and the Raiders are coming off that great winning against the Chargers. So I think this is an easy option for us, yeah.
Our second leg is Miami to beat the Chargers at Hard Rock Stadium. We know how much the Chargers have struggled to close out close games, especially when they've had the lead. So I feel like in Miami against the Dolphins, who are one of the form sides of the league right now, especially on both offense and defense, I feel like the Dolphins are going to be pretty hard to beat at Hard Rock Stadium.
I think
Yeah,
yeah,
I feel like
run
they
a bit.
could really force the rookie into some bad decisions, especially how well they're playing on defense at the moment. I mean, I mentioned all those additions in last week's episode, and they stepped up once again last week against Arizona. So I'll be looking for them to fairly comfortably win against Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's a good point, Arif. Honestly, I don't think Herbert will struggle too much. I feel like it could be like a shootout type of game, but at the end of the day, the Dolphins have their defense, and I think that will be able to close out a win there. Our third leg is the Ravens to beat the Patriots at Gillette Stadium. Personally, I think it was a risky one just because, the Patriots got a good comfort behind win last week. And, back at home, Lamar Jackson hasn't been too flashy this season as compared to seasons past. So, and we just talked about how the Ravens could possibly be a little bit overrated. So at Gillette Stadium, I feel like, I'm speaking the Ravens, but what I'm saying is that this, is one of the riskier picks, I think, this week.
Yeah, definitely. I think if the Ravens want to prove that they're a team that is going to go to the playoffs and they're going to go far, like they should, because they are a good team. This is a game that they should win. But as you mentioned, the Patriots at home, I reckon there's a good chance that they can get up here. Last week they got that clutch win, and 2 weeks ago against Buffalo, they should have won. They arguably should have taken it overtime as well. So they're not that far off from the rest of the good teams in the league, I think. So this is going to be a close one.
Yeah, it's a good point because I think an interesting point to mention is after a number of weeks having struggled, I think Cam Newton really got his mojo back last week against the Jets. Obviously, he played well for the game and he led that game-winning drive to get the win there. So if he can get in that good form, I don't see why it couldn't blow an upset. But I think the Ravens are in the box seat to win this game. Our second last leg is Tennessee to beat Indianapolis at Nissan Stadium on Thursday Night Football. The Colts lost against the Ravens, and the Titans beat the Bears, in what was a pretty dominant win overall. Back at home again, the Titans, I think they're going to be pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be quite a defensive game, to be honest. I think Titans definitely going to look to run the ball a lot more because Colts secondary is much better than their run defense. I think we can all agree on that. So it's going to be defensive, but the Colts offense, I don't know, it's nowhere near the level it needs to be right now to compete with higher teams, with better teams. So the defense did well to contain Lamar Jackson for a bit of the game, but once it stops, their offense just can't keep up, and that's really what's going to be their Achilles heel.
That our final leg of this week's multi is the Bears to beat the Vikings at Soldier Field. The Vikings have traditionally struggled at Soldier Field. The last time they beat the Bears in Chicago was in Mitchell Trubisky's debut game. So I feel like even despite the Bears just really struggling on offense, I feel like having lost 3 in a row, this is a good potential for a bounce back win, a bounce back game, especially if Matt Nagy potentially gives up play calling duties this week.
Yeah, I really think this game personally solely relies on the Bears' ability to stop Dalvin Cook. And I'm a big fan of the Bears' run defense. I definitely think they have the potential. Obviously, they don't have to stop him, but if they can slow him down, obviously not let him get over 200 yards as the Lions did last week, then that will go a long way for the Bears to win that game.
Yeah, I just think their offense definitely has to step up because even if they do manage to stop Dalvin Cook, if their offense can't do anything pretty much like they did against the Titans last week, it's not going to do anything for them. So, because while they may slow down Dalvin Cook, that's not going to prevent the Vikings from scoring. I do expect this to be a low-scoring game, but I can't see the Bears, relying on their defense to win this game. It really has to be the offense that steps up and puts up a much better performance than they did against the Titans because that was hard to watch.
It is worth mentioning that Kirk Cousins has not beaten the Bears during the Matt Nagy era, so it is going to come down to Dalvin Cook versus the defense. But I have pretty good faith in the Bears defense to be able to slow him down. The last time that they did meet at Soldier Field, I don't think he eclipsed 30 yards on the ground, so we'll see how he goes this time. That is multi-madness for this week. Up next, we have a team to watch.
Alrighty. Last week said I had the Miami Dolphins. I didn't expect them to win. I expected them to keep it close against Cardinals, and they won. So good on them. As I said, the defense definitely took a lot of pressure off Tua, but Tua did come up clutch in some good moments. Definitely, he used his legs on one point, which was really good to see. It's just great seeing Kyler Murray versus Tua Tagovailoa, you know, two
exactly.
of the Heisman candidates a few years back. It's great to see them play at a very high level in the NFL. My team to watch this week, we talked about them at the start of the episode. It is the New York Giants. They face the Philadelphia Eagles at home. They did lose in their first meeting by 1 point. That was a really close game, but that was in Philly. I expect the Giants to win this one. Honestly, they haven't been playing that bad. They kept it close against the Buccaneers, and they did get a good win against the Washington football team last week. So if they can build off that momentum, I can definitely see them beating the Eagles. And beyond that, that means that, as I said before, they'll have good records against their division opponents. Obviously, they have a tough schedule, but it's these games they need to win, and this could potentially send them to the playoffs. Who knows?
Yeah, I think the last time these two teams matched up was only a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
It was a one-score game that came down to the wire. So I think, obviously, the Giants didn't win that game, but I feel like this matchup, the two teams, they're very similar in the form. Just the grand scheme of things, they're just similar teams at the moment. So I think that, I won't say it's a revenge game, but I can certainly see the Giants winning this in a close one.
That is Emilien's team to watch going into week 10. Now we have TDU's game of the week up next, and we have chosen the Cardinals at home against the Bills as this week's game of the week. And the Cardinals come in at 5-3, while the Bills come in at 7-2. So it's going to be a good contest. As usual, we have got our 4 aspects of the game which we're going to run through, and I'm going to kick it off with who has the better offense. And personally, I think Cliff Kingsbury's air raid offense is the better of these two offenses. That's not a knock, however, on Buffalo's offense. Obviously, Josh Allen has been, pretty good for the majority of his season. He's had a couple of down games before last week, but this past game against Seattle was definitely a step back in the right direction. However, I'm going to go with the offense that leads the league in offensive yards at 422 yards per game. They also rank 6th in the league in points per game. So I'm expecting a high-scoring game, but I'm also expecting a Cardinals win.
Okay, so I have the defense this week, and honestly, this is a really difficult one to pick. I mean, this time last year, I probably would have picked the Buffalo Bills, but this week I'm going with the Cardinals. I think that the Bills give up too much yardage on defense. I know they're great at causing turnovers, but I personally think overall the Cardinals have a better defense. They get quite a few sacks. They have a really fast game plan on defense. I think that with players like Buda Baker and obviously, I mean, we've been seeing a bit of Isaiah Simmons these last couple of weeks after his strong showing against Seattle. So I think these kind of players are real playmakers, those kind of people you want on your defense. And the Cardinals are definitely the better defense for me right now. Obviously, they didn't have the best outing last week against the Dolphins, but I reckon they can bounce back.
Alrighty. I've got the better coaching this week, and I've gone with the Buffalo Bills. I do think they're one of the most well-coached teams in the league, and a big part of that is you just look at Josh Allen's improvement since his rookie season, and his drastic leap this season in his how he plays. I got to give it to Sean McDermott and the rest of the coaching staff. I think that their game plan going into Seattle was really good. A lot of teams would have been very overconfident going into this game because they had just beaten a division rival that they hadn't beaten in ages. So to come into this game against Seattle and pretty dominate from the get-go, right? Josh Allen balled out. The offense completely destroyed the Seattle defense. A lot of that was on the offensive coordinator, that perfectly executed game plan. But also on the defensive side, to be able to really stop Russell, knock him down 16 times, I believe, and just completely neutralize that offense for the majority of the game, give up garbage time yards. Who cares about that? I've got to give it to Sean McDermott and the Bills for coaching.
Yeah, so for more momentum, I've gone with the Buffalo Bills. That's off their record. The last few games they've played, against Seattle, against Patriots and the Jets, they've played really well so far. And if it wasn't for the Cardinals, they got that field goal in that game against the Dolphins. I might be going with the Dolphins the Cardinals for more momentum here. But the Jets, they're having my goodness, the Bills, they're having a great season so far. They're 7-2. They're leading the AFC East by 2 games, so they're really in a good position at the moment. And I think they've got more momentum based off their offense and defense now. They're playing really well.
Final score predictions?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a high scoring game. I think we'll see 34-31 game.
You know,
Same as
I'm
last week. Oh, sorry, for the Bills.
Right, yeah, I'm going to go even higher than that. I think it's going to be an absolute dominant shootout because the Cardinals defense isn't that good. Neither is the Bills, to be honest. I'm going to go with a. Oh, wow. This is tough. I'm going to go 40 to 35 Bills. Why not?
All right, I think I'm going to go 35-31 through the Bills.
I'll go with 31-28 Cardinals. Now, that is today's game of the week for week 10. The last segment, overreaction, boys.
Yes. All right, Jack, for your first statement, the Chiefs and Steelers will not meet each other in the playoffs.
Well, I've got nowhere to tell, honestly, but I feel like it's an overreaction to call it at this point. I think they could meet in the AFC Championship game. Obviously, I have nowhere to tell this early, but I do think that they will both go deep in the playoffs. So there is, some chance of them meeting late on, and I think if they do meet, it'll be in the championship game.
The Panthers can still make the playoffs.
That's an overreaction. If they have lost a few too many close games to contend with, not only the rest of the NFC, not only the rest of their NFC South rivals, but the rest of the NFC. As we've talked about, it is quite competitive, and I just don't think they've won enough games. They played well, but fell short against both the Chiefs and Falcons in the last 2 weeks, and it's just not going to cut it if they're going to make playoffs, unfortunately.
All right, so the next statement. There is no favorite to win the NFC at the moment.
To the NFC, yeah, that's actually fairly real right now, Anthony. There are a lot of teams that are in the same kind of tier, I'd say. I think, in tier 1, you've got teams like the Buccaneers, Saints, Packers, Seahawks. Out of those, 4 teams, I don't feel as if there's one, really clear standout. I think if the Buccaneers had beat the Saints last week, I'd say the Buccaneers, but to lose in the fashion they lost, I think, they're all around the same area. So each of those 4 teams have their own kind of faults, but yeah, so I can't pick a favorite right now.
Alrighty. Next statement for you, Jack. Deshaun Watson's talent is being wasted in Houston.
Absolutely real, Emilien. As a Deshaun Watson owner in fantasy, I can say that having to watch him play for the Texans in that offense is quite sad. And as a Bears fan myself, having to see him play for the Texans and not the Bears is an even bigger sadness to me. So it is indeed sad to watch him waste away in a city like Houston.
All right, Jack. If the Chargers were completely healthy, they'd be second in the AFC West right now.
It's hard to say, but I think I'm leaning more towards real. Not only if they have more healthy players, but I think to have a couple of those players healthy would have kind of put them over the edge in some of those close games that they lost. And I think a lot of those close games could have put them in a position where that they would be either neck and neck or above the Raiders in that division.
All right, to finish things off for this episode, the Steelers' close game against the Cowboys is boring for them.
Boring?
Yeah.
That's no reaction. I feel like good teams win ugly sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not always going to be a flashy, really great offensive and defensive performance. Sometimes you're going to have little slip ups along the way, but the good teams always find a way to battle their way through and win, even if it's against a lesser team, or even if they win ugly sometimes. I feel like just to get the win in the end is what's important, and I don't think it's worrying at all, especially after they come from a massive win last week against the Ravens. I feel like to come away with the win, after being down big, I think, I wouldn't be worried if I was a Steelers fan at all. They're still undefeated. That is the end of episode 25 of the TouchDownUnder podcast. I hope you enjoyed it today. If you haven't already, make sure you follow us on Instagram. There's at TouchDownUnder, as we post all of our podcast and non-podcast content. We also upload our podcasts to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. It's at TouchDownUnder. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and we'll see you next week. See you later.